So everyone should be able to see that little pop-up on your screen. Perfect. All right. So Katie is a Forbes Coaches Council member, and I'm going to pull her little career highlight here. And she's been involved in more than 50 million in online coaching sales. She is an expert in executive coaching and is a high performance coach with the Career Sprout. And she works with professionals who want to transition into a meaningful career and with a company that they admire in 63 days. Yes, that's amazing. And for any of us who have done that job search, they know how impressive that is. So Katie, I am going to stop my screen share. I'm going to turn the time over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I will give you guys a fair warning. This is a workshop that I've done quite a bit, but I just recently changed it. I'm sure all of you are well aware the market has started to shift fairly dramatically here. So I have made a couple of updates. We should be able to get through it in about 30 to 40 minutes is the goal, 45 max, but then there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end, anything that you guys have, and I blocked out plenty of time afterwards so that we can make sure we cover everything. So this is going to be comprehensive. This is everything you need to know about crushing your interview. And as Lacey mentioned, I know you guys had questions beyond just the interview with resume, things like that. We will cover all of it today. So I'm going to move pretty quickly. If you guys have questions, just put them in the chat and we will dive in. So first and foremost, what we're going to cover is preparing for your interview. I put a little joke here because people tend to remember it more. If you skip this, you are what we say is donezo, completely done. That resume prep, the outreach prep, all of that stuff is very, very important. It is vital. And then of course, in the interview, how to build rapport naturally, absolutely no schmoozing, some psychological hacks for your interview, as well as the questions that you should be asking your interviewer. And almost one of the most important, but almost most forgotten, is what to do after your interview to follow up properly. So as I mentioned, I don't want you guys to get nervous. A big part of this presentation is going to be on preparing for your interview. We will get to the tactical stuff. And actually we've got a playbook, a guidebook that you guys will actually get afterwards that we can send out to you so that you have the tactical stuff. It's this strategic stuff that we're going to go through in the beginning that will make or break you. So we'll make sure you know everything you need to land anywhere from 10 to, you'll see people who have landed $100,000 plus pay increases using proven, predictable, repeatable system instead of the typical not so pleasant guesswork and rejection that typically happens. And I know there's a couple of you on here who are career pivoters. So I did want to bring up two people in particular. This is Anna, and this is good for everybody. Even if you aren't a career pivoter or considering switching careers, the power of this process, it is irrelevant if you are going from a mechanical engineer for 12 years into transferring into finance. This process will still work for you and you will still get those pay bumps that we're going to talk about. Anna was able to go from 97 to 184, and a big piece of that was her interview prep and actually executing on her interviews. Very similar to Kashali, I'll actually mention her again later. She was able to go from healthcare to tech, from a healthcare consultant to a senior product manager in tech, which is a very coveted job. And she was able to get a $45,000 pay bump along the way, again, because of that interview prep work and then executing in her interviews. So the most important thing that we're going to go through here is making sure that you're getting enough interviews with the right companies so that you can show up properly for those. And if you're not getting responses to your messages or your applications, or you're not making it through the interview rounds, it means that you're likely using the old outdated job search model that, as Lacey pointed out, typically takes a whole lot longer than 63 days. So for that, this is what we need to kind of wash out of your brain from this point forward. Old process is putting together a resume, making sure it's one page, applying to hundreds of jobs, telling everybody you're back on the market, reaching out to everybody you can on LinkedIn, letting them know about a job posting you saw, telling them why you're a great fit for that job posting, and then practically begging them to get on a call with you. the goal for today's call is to make it so that you eliminate all the frustration that comes with that, so that you can actually crush any interview that you go into. So no more applying to the jobs, wasting time dealing with recruiters who you can tell typically don't care about your well-being, or they do care, but they act like they care, and then you end up getting ghosted after the interviews. And then when you finally land one, you get really excited, that you get nervous, you say all the wrong things, don't make it past the first round, or maybe even worse, you make it to the second, third, sometimes even seventh round, and then realize you didn't get the job and you don't really know why. And that's really the key. When you don't know that why, you just repeat a broken process over and over again until you actually land a job offer. But since you don't have any other options, you come from a place of frustration and scarcity, then you end up accepting that job, and the cycle repeats itself over and over again because you settled for that job. So looking at your own career, I want you guys to just think of like, how many times has this happened? And then start asking yourself, well, why did that happen? And I don't want you to feel that bad about it. It happened to me multiple times. It happened to our Career Sprout founder far more times. He jumped around to 10 jobs after college before he became one of the youngest executives of a publicly traded company. It happened to me 4 times. I told Lacey kind of the abbreviated version of this beforehand. And I was able to, once I figured out the process, get over $300,000 by the time I was 24. And again, it's not your fault up until this point, from this point forward, you're going to have the right strategy. So don't repeat any broken things. So if you're watching this right now, probably either out of a job or in something you hate, maybe even doing something you love, but you know you're meant for something more, whether that's a higher title, leadership opportunities, better pay raise, or just working in the right industry for a company that you really admire. So real quick, in the last one of those, like, why should you listen to me? Over the last 10 years, our coaches have helped thousands of people with this process. The last 3 years alone, the exact steps that you guys are going to learn today have been used by over 500 professionals, many of them in the height of the pandemic, when we were in fairly similar job market where people were nervous. There was hiring freezes, layoffs, all that good stuff. This still works regardless of the market, which is a pretty exciting thing for us. So again, it's a proven strategy. If you follow the steps that we're going to talk through, it works 100% of the time. I have yet to find somebody who can prove me wrong. There's a big if you follow the steps in the proper order. So as I mentioned, Gaurav, he was our founder. He started with 10 back-to-back dead-end jobs for about 6 years, and then realized that it really was a science. So when I say it's 100% proven, I've still yet to find anybody that can break this, but please don't be the first one. You can try to, and I promise you will succeed. And then he was able to land a $300,000 plus base alone, and 7 figures in total comp, becoming one of the youngest executives of a publicly traded company. And as Lacey mentioned, we're far more proud. Gaurav's great, don't get me wrong. Don't tell him I said that. He'll get a big ego over there, but we're more proud of our students. They, on average, our students can grow their very first transition with us. It'll typically be about $37,000 in 63 days on average. So even cooler than that, and something I'm going to harp on quite a bit here, it's about landing with a company that you really admire, doing something you really love, and building a meaningful career that's going to set you up for future success. It's not just about landing your next job. It's about knowing that whole roadmap for your whole life, for your whole career. So how that works is, once you're in the right position, you're going to love what you're doing because you're playing to your strengths. And this should be your kind of checklist or litmus test here to see if the job you're doing right now checks any or some of these boxes, where you love what you're doing because you're playing to your strengths, you're happier, less stressed because you're making good money, not worrying about what we call normal problems, which is the stress of work. Not that you'll ever be completely rid of stress, but it should be good stress, or what we call, growth stress, and focused solely on doing work that you feel like you were meant to do, where you can produce great results and get more opportunities because you're producing great results, and then continue to grow each time you take advantage of these new opportunities. And as I mentioned, every single student we have goes through this one strategy that has 5 components to it. And once you start implementing it, or once you see it, then start implementing it. The goal here is to eliminate any of the confusion, any of the questions that you have on why it hasn't worked in the past. Easily the most important thing that most people get wrong is that your job search does not start with your resume. So we're going to go through this whole 5-step process. Steps 1 through 3 are what I put into the non-negotiable interview prep phase. And if you do this properly, typically it's only going to take somebody a couple hours to do, but it will make every interview you go on, every negotiation you're in, exponentially easier. So step 1 is going to be getting very crystal clear on what we call your career nirvana. That is your endpoint, what you're aiming for in life. We'll go through how to do that. And then building the perfect resume and LinkedIn profile. And you will know you have the perfect resume, the perfect LinkedIn profile, based on how many recruiters and hiring managers are actively reaching out to you. If they're not reaching out to you, you don't have it right. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. There's a bunch of different resume writers who will tell you very contradicting advice. Our litmus test is how many people are reaching out to you proactively. Then step 3 is going to be your networking or building your network, getting in front of the right people at the companies that you admire. And then it's mastering the interview. So we're going to try to go through steps 1 through 3 as quickly as possible. And then again, we'll go through the tactical stuff on your mastering your interview, and you guys will get a comprehensive playbook so that you can reference it. We'll send it over to you, Lacey, so you can send it out to folks. And then step 5 is that intelligent, or what I like to call logical negotiation to get a competitive offer on the table. So it all starts with knowing that end goal and becoming very granular about that so that you can reverse engineer the path to get there. So I like to use a quick analogy here to make it make more sense. I want you to just imagine if your friend asked you to drive, from California to New York and said, you can't use any map, you just have to drive there. Realistically, it should be fairly easy because just drive east and you're going to get to New York. But ask yourself, would you be taking the fastest route? Probably not. It's probably going to be inefficient, probably going to have detours, probably going to have traffic, probably going to make stops that you didn't need to make, but you'll eventually get there. Now, the key is where in New York, who knows, maybe Buffalo, maybe some bad part of some city. You weren't really given any specifics. Now, what if that same person said to you, hey, I want you to drive from LA to the M&M store in Manhattan and you can use your phone? Well, then all you have to do is plug it into Waze. It's going to show you the fastest possible route. You're going to know which turns to make, which routes to go, and most importantly, which routes to avoid, whether it's because of traffic, an accident, whatever the case may be. And I personally use Waze because it also has the cops all along the route. So that's a little shout out for Waze. Now, how that actually relates to your career. Think about how many detours you've taken, how many companies you've worked for, and it's very possible you're in one right now, where the company didn't really serve you or your mission, your purpose in life. And you ended up getting stuck, or you're not getting the opportunities that you think you should be, or you're not getting the pay raises that you think you should be. Most people feel those frustrations, and this is the big problem. They feel it, and then they say, hey, I just need to get to New York. But then again, because there's no specifics there, they end up in New York, but it's not what they expected. Now, when you can plug into your career GPS, so to speak, M&M store in Manhattan, it becomes very easy for us to know, hey, this is where I'm supposed to be, and here's how I can reverse engineer the path to get here, just like a GPS does. So that is always step number 1. And this is typically the step that most people will skip. And I can tell every single time somebody skips it because nothing else works. So once you know your M&M store, this is how we know exactly what to put on your resume. We know how to articulate your strengths, your value, the impact that you make, and then we'll know we did it right because, again, recruiters and hiring managers will start reaching out to you, even if you're switching to a brand new career path. So the tactical steps here, how to define your M&M store. I want you guys to think about, and you don't have to do it right now, you'll have the recording for this as well. Spend some time thinking about where you want to end up, your ideal title, the company, meaning like the size of the company, the culture of the company, things like that, your pay, your responsibilities, perks, all that good stuff. And an important note here is that a lot of people aim for work-life balance because they don't like their work. Often your career nirvana is not about work-life balance. Your career should support your life. It should support your lifestyle and what we call work-life harmony. That's something that probably could take a full hour to go into, so I'll just leave it at that. But things to keep in mind to better help spark some ideas there is the lifestyle you want, the values that you have, thinking about whether or not you want to be a leader or whether you want to be an individual contributor, the natural career progression you want to have, the culture that's important to you. Getting really granular with that vision is always going to be your first step here. So everything else from that point forward is going to be using that as the measuring stick to, is what I'm doing going to move the needle closer or further to my end goal, to my career nirvana? Once you've identified where you're going, then what you can do is reverse engineer the path to get there. And then you'll research individuals who have gotten there. So the way you do that is you research individuals who have achieved your career nirvana, and then look at the path that got them there. So a good example of that is, let's say you want to be one of the top chief product officers in the world. This is Neil. He is the chief CPO for YouTube, and he was paid $100 million bonus simply to not go to Twitter. That is going to be some of you may have that aspiration. That's awesome. You can go to LinkedIn and you can see the exact path that he took to get there. Now, not all of you are going to want to do that. Not everybody wants to be a C-level executive. What you're going to do is pick where along your map, maybe you want to be, for product management example, maybe your goal is a senior product manager, where you want to have great work-life harmony, where you have, a lot of time dedicated to your personal life versus bulk of your time dedicated to work. A little bit less stress than being a C-level executive. That's awesome. You can get paid. There are senior product managers that get paid more than chief product officers. So anywhere along this path, you're going to figure out who it is that you want to be, or who it is you think you want to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and map that path out. Then what you'll do is look at, okay, well, what is the next rung for me on this ladder? Let's say you're making a career pivot, and this is going to be your first time on the product manager, career path, so to speak. You may, depending on your experience, start as an associate product manager. You may be able to jump right up to product manager. Kashali, who we mentioned in the beginning, she was able to jump right to the senior product manager rung, and she was able to get started there because she had transferable experience and skills. So once you know, hey, this is my next rung, then what you're going to do is research 15 to 20 job descriptions that match that. So let's say your next job that you're going to be applying for is a product manager. What you want to do is look for product manager roles across different companies and identify the keywords, the skills, the tools that are repeated across those role descriptions for different companies. If it's repeated, it's important. And a good tip here, or a good hack here, is to pretend you're a hiring manager. And you can simply look up, product manager job description templates, and then LinkedIn is a great one. You'll pull sample product manager job descriptions that have fairly well written, in-depth, skills, experience, qualifications that they are looking for in that role. So this is one, again, for a product manager. And then what you'll do is you'll build a list of the skills that they're looking for. So you want to, again, write out each of these things for your next role, and then it'll look something like this. You can do it on paper, you can do it in a Google spreadsheet. This is one for a product manager, where they're looking for somebody, who has an innovative mindset, who can guide cross-functional teams, all sorts of good things here. Once you do that, you're going to list, and this is where the rubber really meets the road for the interview prep. You're going to list what we call your STAR experience, which is a fairly famous acronym nowadays for talking about the situation, the task, the action, and the result from an experience that you had that talks about, when you were able to guide cross-functional teams, or whatever the case may be. And so what you'll do, let's say a tangible skill here is they're looking for somebody to guide cross-functional teams. They're also looking for intangibles. Now, somebody asked before here, how can you stand out from other people who, may have the same experience as you, some people who may have more experience than you? It's the intangibles. And I have yet to find an exception to this, but almost every single company is looking for somebody who is happy, humble, and hungry. And we'll dive into that a little bit more. But I also want you to pay really close attention. This is why career nirvana is important, to the culture intangibles. So things like within our companies, it's ruthless honesty is a really important one for us. If somebody shows us that they're ruthlessly honest, they're self-aware, that they're coachable, those are important things to us. And each company is going to have, different, these are just a couple of examples. Each company will have a different culture that they are looking for and trying to find the intangibles during the interview process, during the application process. So if you really can pay attention to those, you will have a massive leg up. This is probably one of the biggest secret sauce, whatever you want to call it, that we have, is getting really good at identifying the company's culture, their values, which almost all of them have them on their website. They're not hard to find. And then making sure each of your star stories, your star experiences show or demonstrate that you have those intangible skills that they're looking for and that they value. So this is a real example actually that somebody used in their interview. And you'll see really quickly how going through this process in this way, you're essentially writing your responses to interview questions that they are likely going to ask. So as we mentioned before, this is the list of the important skills, qualifications, and experience that a company would likely be looking for in a product manager. And so this person said, use this as their experience, as one of like the experiences that they wanted to highlight. And you'll notice it's both the experience, the thing that happened, as well as the quantifiable result. So the situation was one of our clients we recently signed on who had no prior history with us asked us to deliver several large-scale app development requests that needed to be delivered in less than 4 weeks. This particular project had 3 distinct deliverables, which they had already committed to their own clients. And knowing that it was due in a short amount of time, I scheduled an all hands on deck meeting with cross-functional teams and outlined the importance of this project and the future business that it could potentially bring us. After getting buy-in from each team, I gathered thorough requirements from the client and created clear and concise specs for each of the teams involved on this project. Not only were we able to deliver all 3 projects on time, but we delivered them 2 days before their product release, giving them enough time to review the work and make some minor changes. The success of this project ultimately led to our client viewing us as a trusted partner rather than just a vendor, thus resulting in over $750,000 in additional project work. Now, this is some people will see this and get overwhelmed and be like, man, that's a whole lot to come up with 30 different examples like that. And to memorize all of them to go into an interview is super overwhelming. Cool thing is, on average, most people only need about 6 of these examples. So this one example can be used for 9 out of the 30, qualifications that they were looking for. It shows you could use this as a confident leader, as leading, a multidisciplinary development team to drive the product and business planning process across cross-functional teams of the company. There's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of things that this one example can be used for. So once you've gone through that process, even when you don't have direct experience with some of the, some of the line items that they're asking for, or all of one of the line items. It's not for all of the line items, just to clarify that. Even when you don't have that direct experience, a lot of times you can still get to the same endpoint by showing them that you know how to problem solve and that you have a history of tallying wins. Very important. That's that quantifiable accomplishments part, or the result of your experience. That's how you gain deserved trust, especially if you're a career pivoter and you don't necessarily have the same career experience that somebody else may have. And it's your job. This is one of the main points of the entire presentation. It's your job to show your interviewer how you're the perfect solution to the problem that they're hiring to solve. That's a very important distinction there. A lot of people go in and they're very nervous about presenting themselves well. Reality is your goal is to identify the problems that they are looking to solve by hiring. Great example of somebody, she went from $80,000 to $170,000, brand new field. She became a brand marketing manager and beat out all of the other brand marketing managers because she went through that interview prep process, and she was able to use all of her communication strategist skills, both the tangible and the intangible, and show how they were transferable to this new role. And so again, we spent a good amount of time on that because it is the non-negotiable foundation for your interviews. So now a little bit more, less strategic, a little bit more tactical stuff that you can do in the interview itself. Building rapport, very important. Again, not schmoozing though. So the most important aspect of your interview is your connection with your interviewer. So easiest way to connect is by asking them questions, getting them to talk about themselves. So a couple of really simple ones is to start off the conversation is just, when did you start working here? How did you get to the position? A little bit later in the conversation, you can ask for any advice that they would give their younger self. It's very important that you treat your interviewer like a friend that you're having with like a conversation you're having with a friend, because your interviewer is asking, 1, can this person do the job? And 2, more importantly, can we work with this, or can I work with this person every single day for hours on end. So if you can get them to view you like a friend and a qualified applicant, the answer becomes an obvious yes for that interviewer in their mind. So real quick, I want you guys to just even think about a time that you finished meeting up with a good friend, maybe an old friend that you haven't seen in a couple of years, and you're catching up on each other's lives. It's very rare for you to catch up with an old friend and for you to, ask them a question and then have them respond to the question. And then you ask another question and they respond to the question. That is not how humans interact with each other. And to the point where nobody likes spending time with somebody when they only talk about themselves. And that is what most hiring managers go through hours on end, days, day after day, sometimes week, months after month, interviewing for a position. They just hear people talking about themselves. So don't robotically answer questions about yourself the entire time. That is not the sign of a good interview. You want to ask them questions. You want to get them doing bulk of the talking if you can, but at least 50% of the talking, asking them about the company, the industry, things that they're personally proud of, whether it's individually or the things that the company has done that they're proud of. And again, if you only get one thing, this is that everybody's got to hop off now, or there's only like one slide, like make this the thumbnail of the video here. Your goal is to get the interviewers talking about themselves and practice active listening so that you can you want to put a consultative hat on, or a doctor's hat on, and diagnose the situation so that you can prescribe the solution to their problems. So perfect example, this student, he didn't even apply for the role. Sometimes people don't even need a resume. It's funny because that's where everybody gets the most caught up. A lot of times our students will just have to submit a resume like as a formality. He wasn't even making six figures yet. And then he landed a $100,000 pay bump because he crushed his interview. He went in with a consultative mindset, asked the right questions, and got the interviewer talking, and then essentially positioned himself as a solution to all of the problems that they had. And they were like, okay, top dog, we need to hire this person. And so they paid him based on the value. This is very important. I'll go on this a little bit more at the end. He got paid on his value that he can bring, not based on what he was making previously. You never have to answer that question if somebody asks you, what you're making right now in your job or what you made at your last job. So again, we'll get to that at the end here. 4 quick psychological hacks for you guys. Best way, the only way our students start their interviews is with this question. Every single time, this is what you should say. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me, first name. I'm really excited to get started and learn more about your company as well as this position and discuss how I may or may not be able to add value. But before we get started, I'm really curious to know, what was it about my resume or background that made you decide to speak with me today? Now, this is especially important if you are a career pivoter, especially if you're a little bit nervous about, being qualified for the job. Now, why we ask this, it is essentially going to give you the answers to the test. It's a cheat sheet for the rest of the interview. They are telling you exactly what they like about you. And so you now know where to steer them throughout the rest of the interview and what to highlight as you're giving responses to them. Then hack number 2, if you are still nervous, remind yourself you already have the interview, right? They're speaking with you for a reason, especially if you're a career pivoter, transitioner, and you're less qualified in your eyes with tangible skills. They're not going to waste their time if they didn't think you were capable. So don't fall into the pitfall of bragging about yourself. No room for bragging in an interview. It should be verifiable, quantifiable, showing you should be demonstrating that you are happy, humble, and hungry. That humble is a big one. So know that you have that interview for a reason and just carry that confidence in to show them how you can uncover their challenges. Again, you should be asking questions to figure out what the challenges are, uncover them, add value, and show how you can solve their problems. Another good hack here, so that there's a few Navy SEAL authors that have made this famous over the last couple of years, where before you go into an interview or really anything that's nerve-wracking, even like a fight with your spouse or something like that, do something called box breathing. It's super simple. You just take 4, as you breathe in, just breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, then breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds. That's it. If you can't do a full 4 seconds, you can do it for 2. If you've got super strong lungs, you can do it for 10 seconds. But it will calm your nervous system down. It'll calm everything down so that you can go in and present yourself well. I could go into the science behind it, but again, I want to leave plenty of time for questions here. We're already running a little behind. So hack number 3 here, every interviewer likes feeling special. And this goes back to, treating them more like a friend. Nobody cares about how much you know until they know about how much you care. It's a very cliched, famous quote for a reason. You want to ask questions to show your interviewer that you genuinely do care about them and the company. So you can ask simple things. Again, how did you get where you are in your career? What's one thing you'd change about this company if you could? In your opinion, what do you feel are your biggest competitive advantages and disadvantages relative to competitors? And what advice would you give your younger self if you were joining this company? Now, you want to make it specific to the person. So like if you see that they've been there for 17 years, you can highlight that where it's like, cool, like what's made you stay here, for 17 years? Or if they had a cool background that you saw on LinkedIn and they just, you're speaking to somebody who just transitioned into like away from Nike and into whatever, a small startup. It's like, cool, like what made you make that jump? And make it personal to them. Show that you did some homework, show that you did some research on them. And then this is maybe my favorite hack. Always ask this question. This should always be your last question at the end of the interview, where it's just, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me and for providing more light on the position, as well as telling me more about yourself. They should have told you more about themselves. Before we wrap up, I want to ask, is there anything about my experience or any of my answers that concerns you about my ability to perform this job at a high level or to move on to the next round of the interview process? If so, I'd love the opportunity to clarify or confirm any of your hesitations. Now, why do we ask this? Biggest reason is it's going to show you exactly what they liked or disliked. So if they liked things, you can focus on it in later rounds. If they have concerns, you can either validate or clarify them right on the spot. Second thing here is we've all had those times where it's like, whether it was after an interview or you got in a fight with somebody, you're driving home and it's like, I should have said this. This gives you the opportunity right there on the spot to say something better that you could have articulated better. And then also it tells you like you don't have to leave knowing, like wondering what if. And then I think I lied. Number 3 is actually more important than number 1. It shows them that you know how to handle constructive criticism well. That shows that you are coachable, you're self-aware, you have high emotional intelligence. Again, these are the intangible things that you can't tell somebody you have. You can only demonstrate that you have them. And so a big thing here, you have to handle this well. If they point out something that they're worried about, or that you didn't respond to something well, whatever the case may be, you can't come back to them and say, I already told you that I knew how to do this, or that's not true, or anything like that. You have to take it very graciously, very humbly, and say, oh, I'm so glad you brought this up. I should have mentioned, or I should have clarified that XYZ. And so, especially if you are a career pivoter, or you're going for a bit of a stretch in a job where you may not have as much experience as everybody else, one of your star stories that you should have in your back pocket prepared is how you were a quick learner at one point. So it may be something where they say to you, I'm a little bit concerned because you don't have as much experience as the other candidates. That's the opportunity for you to say, I'm so glad you brought this up, because it actually reminds me a lot about, my time at company XYZ, where I didn't know how to bake cupcakes, but I had baked a cake once before. And so I was able to find somebody, a mentor within the team who taught me how to make the secret recipe cupcakes. And we stayed late. I worked on the weekends. I learned how to do it. And, within 3 months, I was making these cupcakes and we were able to sell X of them and, make X amount of profit, whatever the case may be. You should have one of your stories lined up like that to demonstrate that you are a quick learner. You never want to say to somebody who says, I'm a little nervous that you don't have, experience coding or whatever the case may be. You never want to say, okay, like, don't worry about it, I'm a quick learner. That means nothing. That almost like puts up another red flag for them. You can't say you're a quick learner. You have to demonstrate that you're a quick learner. It's a very small nuanced thing. I apologize. I think the landscapers just got here a little bit early. So this is a great example of somebody who, especially in today's market, I wanted to highlight him because he mapped out his career path. He knew he wanted to be a product manager. He knew he wanted to be a senior product manager at a specific type of company. And he got laid off when COVID layoffs first started happening. The company downsized and he was able to more than double his salary. I think the official number was 276. It was a little bit more than 250, and made 7 figures in total comp because of his interview process. And not only because he, nailed his interviews, but then he followed up properly. And that's the next thing we're going to talk about here is he got rejected actually from companies that he ended up working with in the future. He got rejected at one point, but then he followed up with them properly and stayed in touch with those companies. And it only took him 25 days. If you notice the dates there, it took him 25 days after being laid off to more than double his salary. And that's a big thing to point out here. When you follow each of these steps and you do them, I know we have to kind of go quickly through some of them. When you consistently do them, even after you have a job, you never have to worry about anything in the market. Essentially, even if you're laid off, you will have so many opportunities, and you will have had people actively reaching out to you, the recruiters and the hiring managers, because of your LinkedIn profile. You will always see the opportunity there, and you don't ever have to operate from that place of scarcity again. So again, a big part of that was how he followed up with after those interviews. It's very essential. A lot of people don't do it. Best thing you can do, still hands down, is a handwritten thank you note. Not everybody is back at the office. Not everybody's ever going to be in the office. So you may not be able to send a thank you note because it may be like to their home, which would obviously be a little scary. So don't do that. You can send an email, but here's a framework that you can use where it's just, again, being very, very grateful for everything that they shared, all that good stuff. And then being specific. So as you go through this, it says, after speaking with you, I'm even more excited about this opportunity. I believe in my ability to be resourceful, right? These may have been one of the things that they highlighted or one of the things that they were concerned about. This is your opportunity to highlight those in this message, in this letter, as well as your relevant experience. And then just, continuing the dialogue. Very simple letter. It does go a long way. And if you haven't heard back from them within 2 weeks, it's totally acceptable for you to send a follow-up email. And if they still say, hey, there's no decision yet, you can say, thanks so much for the update. Do you have a sense of what the timing would look like moving forward, or when an appropriate time would be for me to check back in? I'm really excited about the opportunity, but I know these things take time, so I don't want to follow up too often. And you want to be polite. This is something that some companies have built into their system now, where they will purposely delay occasionally to see how you handle that delay. This was somebody, she was expecting 125 to 135, but and it took actually longer than we even expected for her to hear back. But because we were following up properly, she ended up with $165,000 base plus a bonus and the title she wanted. So that follow up and doing it properly, extremely important. So again, a quick recap here. And I deleted some of the slides that I meant to, but not all of them. Very important for you guys to prepare for the interview. Again, I harped on that for so long, and I spent so much time on that because that really will make or break the rest of your interview process. And one of those steps, again, I removed some of the slides, reaching out to not only recruiters and hiring managers, but the executives, the C-suite executives of that team. A lot of times they will champion you along the way, and most people are terrified to reach out to those folks. So they actually don't get hit, their LinkedIn inbox doesn't get hit nearly as much. And things like this happen all the time, where they will connect you with the hiring manager. And you can imagine if your boss tells you, hey, look at this candidate, they will tend to look at that candidate a little bit closer. And again, when you've got it set up right, you'll hear from a lot of companies, both because they're reaching out and because you're reaching out to them. And it doesn't matter if you're this works if you're landing 7-figure, comp packages. It works if you are landing your first 6-figure job. The process is identical. Doesn't matter. Even a lot of people get nervous about like Google and Microsoft, same process, still same exact process works. This was actually her first time getting over 6 figures. That was pretty exciting. And she actually held out. She got 5 awesome job offers. But again, knowing what your dream really is and being confident that you can hold out for that. So obviously each of these people, they were our students. They had experts guiding them along the way. And I actually didn't share this with Lacey. This was a last minute addition that we added in. I just spoke to Gaurav beforehand to see if he could open his calendar, because our students know what action steps to take every single day, what to do before they go into any conversation, how to say it, what to say it, all the twists and turns, essentially anything that could come up. And because the job market is changing so quickly and people are getting a little bit more tense, I asked our founder, and actually one of our other coaches are going to open their calendar for any of you that have interview prep sessions. Normally, we charge non-students for this. They agreed to all but waive the fee for 90% off. So rather than it being $1,000 for the next 24 hours, if you book a call, you don't have to book the call in the next 24 hours. We can extend the schedule. It will be $97. So this is something that if you have an interview already lined up and you want to go through that prep work of making sure your STAR experience actually speaks to the role that you're going for, you know how to prep for the different questions, curveballs, all of that stuff, you can use this link to do that. There's more people on here than I expected to, so we may need to extend those out a little bit longer if that's something that you guys are interested in. But I can ask one of our additional coach to open up their calendar if need be as well. But this is something, please don't share it outside of this. This was something as a thank you to you guys for hosting us for the first time, actually. And just wanted to make sure you guys have the resources that you need to be successful as you are navigating and as the market is starting to change. So with that, I can stop sharing my screen here and answer whatever questions that you guys have or any questions that came up during that. It looks like there may have been a few that came in the chat as we were talking there.
Thanks so much, Katie. What great information. I loved, the question that you posed to maybe start the interview. I don't think people usually think about, starting the interview with a question from yourself. I think we always go into the interview prepped for questions to come to us.
Yes.
So I like that proactive approach. That was a really great tip.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is, it also changes the dynamics of, and I just realized I stopped sharing my screen. I'll put the link in there for you guys to have it. It changes the dynamics of the interview as well. And it automatically solidifies you as different from the other candidates that they have been speaking to all day.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see the questions here. Is a one-page resume really that great? I had someone at the UA Career Lab. Is it still called that? Yeah, 2 pages is okay. So the one guideline there is if you're under 5 years of work experience, so you're 20, you should be able to fit it all on 1 page. Is it the end of the world if you don't? No, but you really should be able to. You likely don't have that much professional experience that you need to go on to 2 pages. If you are more senior in your career and you've got more than 5 years of experience, 2 to 3 pages, even we've had people with 3 pages, totally fine as well. So long as it's keyword optimized and there's no fluff. There should be absolutely no fluff in there. Every single bullet point that you have should be an experience and an accomplishment. So it's something, project, whatever you worked on, and the quantifiable result to the company. That's a super important thing to have. So if you graduated in 2020, you definitely should be able to fit it all in 1 page. Or is it better to tailor your resume based on the job you're applying for? Yes, tailor it for that job that you're applying for. And using that exercise that we went through to identify what those keywords are that they're looking for. So when a recruiter or a hiring manager is searching for candidates, they will search for those keywords. So you want to pop up on their search. Question kind of long loaded. I quit a dead-end job last year. Congratulations. They did not demonstrate any leadership. The job itself was not good for my well-being, but what's the best way to address this? I feel like it'll haunt me in the not too distant future. So yes, the landscapers are definitely here. I don't know if you guys can hear my dog in the background there, but career gaps aren't that big of a deal right now. So if you quit your job last year and there's a gap, if that's what you're worried about, not a big deal, so long as you have a compelling narrative as to why. So it's very important that when you're in an interview, you are never bashing your last company or you're never speaking negatively about your last company. All you want to do, you can write out all of the terrible things about that, like all of the things that were wrong for you. And most likely what your dream company is going to have is going to be essentially the opposite of each of those things. So let's say you had a leader, there are some people who think the best manager, the best leader in the world is by their side, holding their hand, making sure they have every SOP they need, making sure they've got all of the resources, all of access to everything they need so that they can do their job well. I would not last long there. I would call that person like a micromanager. I wouldn't enjoy myself there. I like somebody who gives me complete freedom. I would rather them not even, I want them to solely give me the end result that they're looking for and not tie me to any specific way to get there. So it's really important for you to know that it's very rarely, hey, this is good, hey, this is bad. It's better for you to look at, hey, this is my preference, this is not my preference. And so just by making that slight shift there, you will be able to articulate to people so that it doesn't haunt you. Hey, the reason why I left was because it wasn't in alignment with what I wanted to do. It wasn't the environment that set me up to thrive. I'm looking for, and again, you don't have to bash them. I'm looking for X, Y, Z, or whatever you are looking for. And they didn't have that. And they're like, that's okay. A hiring manager, a recruiter, they'll get that. They'll understand that. What they're looking for, again, are those intangibles, that happy, humble, hungry. Are you happy? Are you going to be negative no matter where you are? That's typically how it comes across if you talk about your past companies with negative undertones. Even if they did something unethical, even if they did something wrong, you don't have to throw anybody under the bus. You can say, I'm looking for a company that promotes, being ethical and, 1, 2, 3, whatever the case may be. Would you be able to share the slides presentations of recording? Yes. Oh, you already answered that. Great. What about remote interviews? I've had these and the timing didn't seem appropriate for me to ask many other questions. Yeah, so most interviews are remote interviews, at least for the last couple of years. So same dynamic. And it's a good question because you don't want to be rude. So let's say they dive in and they've got their, operating system for this is how we, do an interview. It's not, you don't have to jump in and say, hi, I have a question for you, like before we get started here. You can often there's typically some degree of small talk of some sort where it's like, hey, like, how's it going there? Like, where are you calling from? Whatever the case may be. And then even if they dive right in, you can answer their question. You don't want to avoid their question, but then follow it up. Whatever first question they ask you, you can very politely say, hey, before we really dive in here, hopefully you don't mind me saying this, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm also just really curious, what was it specifically about my resume or about my background that made you want to do this interview today, right? It can be a very comfortable transition, even if they have already asked you a question. But the other thing there, if it feels a little, if you're somebody who's a little bit more introverted and you are socially awkward, so to speak, and I'm saying this very lovingly, I'm still very introverted, but I was as socially awkward as you can get as an introvert 5 years ago. And so I needed somebody to give me here's how you say it. You can go practice this on a note card, for 2 hours before you talk to somebody. That was me. I would look up that person. I would look up that person on LinkedIn. So you had something specific about them that you could tie into that first question where it's like, hey, and you can even use it before the interview starts. It becomes really, really natural for you to hop on the call and be like, hey, Lacey, I hope you don't mind this, or I hope this doesn't sound weird before we get started here, but I saw on your LinkedIn profile, that you've been here for X amount of years. I was just wondering, what's made you stay for so long? Or, what made you just transition? Depending on where they're at, you can almost always find a very easy question. And then the interviewer is going to be like, oh, thanks for asking about me. And it typically just shifts everything. And then whenever they answer, it's cool. If you don't mind my asking one more question, what was it about my resume or background that made you want to speak with me? Right. And you can make it very natural. You never want it, again, you want it to feel like you're talking to a friend. It shouldn't feel like, hey, here's a checklist of questions. Before we get started, I need to ask you this, these answers to get the answers to this checklist that I have here. You don't want to be a robot. You want it to feel a little bit more natural, and it'll take some practice. You got to get those preps, the reps in. That's our whole reason for those interview preps that we do. I feel like there's a good slogan in there somewhere. Didn't realize that it rhymed. Cool. I've got several years of office stuff still. I'll still clear it up. Yeah, and you just want to practice. I'm not a big fan personally of professional resume writers, because if you take that time to pull those experiences, and again, if you do that step one and you list out your star experiences, it's really great practice for being able to concisely articulate your narrative. It's a really good thought exercise, if nothing else, to do your resume. And I'm always really hesitant, especially the higher up you go, the more common it is for somebody to outsource their resume writing. And occasionally it does work, obviously, otherwise they wouldn't still be in business. But I think I think you still end up investing that time during your interviews, or you end up not presenting yourself as well as you could in your interviews. Let's see. Do you have additional tips for group interviews? How do I set myself apart from others in the group while still being respectful and encouraging for other interviewees? That's a good question. So again, the things that'll set you apart, especially in a group, there's not one answer that works for every interview. The things that can set you apart are those intangibles. So making sure you know whatever company that you're interviewing at, if it's in a group setting, making sure you know what their core values are as a company, what their mission and purpose is, what their values are, what their principles are, because those are typically the things that they're looking for in the group setting. And so a lot of times people go into those and they're trying to prove their tangible skills. Hey, yeah, I'm really good at this, or I have experience doing this, when in reality, it's almost like a group study, and they're looking to see how you interact with people. And so depending on the company that you're going to, sometimes it's not even just company culture. Oftentimes it's a team culture that they're looking for, or even a role culture that they're looking for. So there's not a right or a wrong. Again, it's like the preference thing. So they may not be looking for the world's most extroverted, coder. That doesn't usually translate to a great coder, somebody who needs to be surrounded by people and talking all day. And so it's going to be very specific to the role, the company, and the role that you're going for. And then being able to think of ways to demonstrate those intangibles. And again, if nothing else, if you, for whatever reason, didn't research the company, that should never happen, because you should be going for your dream companies. But that happy, humble, hungry is a very simple 3 things for you to remember that will make you stand out from other people in and of itself. And then just, so again, thinking of how to practicing those star questions or star responses, having those ready to share how, you can demonstrate those intangibles is a really good way to stand out. And that includes, so again, this kind of depends. If you're going for a Wolf of Wall Street type company, they're probably looking for, killers. And so they're probably not looking for you to be able to be encouraging to other people. They are probably looking for people who can handle a rejection really well, or, different things like that. And so knowing what they're really looking for is an important part of that, so that you can kind of tailor it there. And then ideally, again, these things will come naturally to you, because part of that process of looking for companies is making sure you're finding those companies that naturally align with you. So being really naturally yourself, being really authentic, and having that person be in complete alignment with their company culture is a really powerful thing. Socially awkward, feeling attacked. Yeah, I'm right there with you. How would you work with interviewing within the same company for a leadership role, previously knowing? Oh, that's a great one. So if you are looking for internal promotions, or you're very familiar with the people, that's a great time for you to just play on that rapport a little bit more, where you guys have shared experience of some sort, making sure that you are even more so asking them questions about how it's been and different things like that, and making it feel as natural as possible is really powerful for internal promotions. And it's almost like you get to, it's almost like a hack, where it's you're already within the same tribe, or you've been within the same tribe. So it's a good idea to play on that. And sometimes people will get I would say like the one time it doesn't feel like it's a positive, if you have a little bit of that imposter syndrome, or you're nervous because, you know, they know a time you messed up or whatever the case may be. Or also like, sometimes like people just get jitters. I'm speaking some people. I know myself, I've gotten jitters just when I've like seen somebody that I knew unexpectedly. And it's like, oh, it's almost like they know an old version of you. So especially when you're stepping into a leadership role, it's like, well, they didn't know me as a leader. So I'm a little bit nervous that they're not going to see me as a leader now. So you've got to have those, you know, tangible thing, or those experiences that you can like draw on, where you were an unofficial leader. And almost everybody has those, where there was times that you had to step up most likely and lead something because somebody was out, or just the job required you to step up and lead. It's really important for you to have those things if you are feeling a little bit like an imposter, or whatever the case may be, feeling like, they don't know me as a leader. Like, what if they don't think I can do this? Like, you need to believe in yourself that you can do it before you can get somebody else to believe it.
Perfect. And Katie, we're right at that time, so I'm actually going to close out. And then if you're okay staying after, I know there were some additional questions that
Sure.
maybe people wanted to ask, but thank you so much for your time and your expertise, Katie. This was just fantastic. And everyone, really great comments, really great questions. I wanted to just share this real quick as we close out. We appreciate you being here, appreciate you being part of our Wildcat community. Here is the website. I know some people were wanting to get the recording, so we'll have the website updated in a couple days with the recording. You can always follow us on the Bear Down Network. And there's my email if you have any additional questions. And we actually offer some alumni coaching if you want some more help to follow up on some of the tips and tricks that Katie presented to us today. So thank you, everyone. And we'll stay on here if you have some additional questions. But if you need to go, thanks again for joining us. So bear down and go Cats.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I think that may have been